Okay, this is the next video I'm making in response to Golden's ideas. And in this video, I want to do it as quickly as possible. I want to address two concepts that he was arguing, and or, I don't know if you can call it arguing. It was just his opinion, but what he was saying in his long response to me, the two concepts I want to cover is his philosophy of geoism and then education, because he seems to be someone who believes that if the government wasn't providing, didn't have a monopoly on education, that we'd all be uneducated hicks. So first, geoism. I want to state that Golden, I had never heard of this philosophy before you mentioned it, and I'm sure unlike what you did when you know, someone who's probably never studied capitalism in depth, when I hear of something I don't know, I actually go and try to research it a little bit before I outright reject it. And so I did the bare minimum and went to Wikipedia to try to learn a little bit more about what geoism is, and let's see if I get the philosophy straight. Geoism essentially is a very big philosophy that works as one big giant entitlement program. It states that the world is the property of everyone by the sake of being born, that everyone has an equal stake to everything on the earth. It states that apparently all property on earth should be communal, and that if anyone ever pursues anything for their own interest, own specific interest, any resource or any part of the planet, that they need to be punished for doing that. Okay, so let me see if I under. Number one, I looked and I can't think of one society that has ever survived on this philosophy ever. Okay, as much as people bitch about anarchism, you can point to a handful of places where it did work. In early Ireland, early Iceland, a couple of the New England colonies before government, before they were made actual states in the British Empire and were run by companies, they existed without government, and they weren't just the fucking Wild West where everyone was screwing everyone else. With geoism, I can't think of one society that has ever existed on this prospect that everyone owns everything and that you're punished for ever using something for your own good. Let's give an example here. Let's say that we're living in a communal society and I'm stumbling around one day, and let's say just by chance I discover a huge deposit of iron ore a couple feet under the dirt. No one else knew it was there. I'm the first one to discover it. And let's say I'm a creative guy and I'm thinking, hey, I can smelt it and use it to make something that I can try to sell to my communal brothers in order to make their lives better and make myself a little bit richer in the process. By the standard of geoism, the fact that I've discovered something that no one else has found out and that I want to use it for my own personal gain is wrong, and I have to be punished. And the people who are actually in the right here, the people that never discovered it, have no idea what to do with it, have not had any idea of using it, but these people are somehow just because they apparently weren't doing anything with it. But when I want to do something with it, apparently I'm the one who's in the wrong. How does society survive when no one is allowed to do anything for themselves? Again, this is what I was saying in my last video, that you apparently think human beings are like the Borg from Star Trek, or robots, where they're all working like ants in a colony and no one is allowed to do anything for themselves. Whether you believe the concept is genetic like Richard Dawkins does, or whether you believe it's culturally imparted upon us from birth, people act within their own self-interest all the time, okay? All the great wonders of society have been created by people pursuing their own interests, okay? It's never been created by the fucking governments that's decided, okay, we're going to think this up and do it, okay? People who pursue their own ideas for their own purposes are the ones who come up with the creative ideas that have allowed society to progress through the ages. But apparently in geoism, if anything, it sounds like a giant Luddite colony to me. You're not allowed to do anything with property or resources, and if the people that do want to do that, apparently they owe something to the people that never wanted to do anything with those resources, and they need to be punished through taxation. It's a hysterical concept. No society has ever used this. If they ever tried it, the society would fail because no one would have any incentive to invent new technologies, to do anything for themselves, and thus the society would collapse. So again, I don't know how many people actually buy into the society. The fact that no single state in the world or even group of people in the world adhere to this shows how much of a stupid and ridiculous idea it is, because it just wouldn't work ever, okay? So that's just addressing geoism, and it wouldn't work. Second point that I want to talk about is education, because you apparently in one of your text comments was claiming that people would be uneducated and wouldn't be able to go to school without public education. Okay, let me ask you the question. How is it that when the government controls something, does not allow competition, thus has no incentive to make it better over time, how does that benefit everyone in society? Okay, you're someone who, for whatever reason, is critical of private institutions as if they're doing something wrong. Again, I pointed out in one of my text responses, why is it that the private institutions like Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, Notre Dame are all the colleges that are consistently ranked as the best in the nation, whereas you have public universities? I'm not saying there aren't good public universities out there, but consistently you have public universities that always come in below these top tier echelon schools. Okay, for these schools certainly being more expensive, how the hell is it that people are willing to take out the massive loans and go to these schools? Okay, the concept that you don't understand is that when government subsidizes education, it's really not benefiting anyone. Okay, because when the government knows it can just tax someone to produce a product that people use just because it's artificially cheap, they have no incentive to make it better. For instance, every public university in Illinois is bankrupt right now. The colleges aren't getting any of the money the state promised them, and right now they're doing a lot of horrible things like firing teachers, giving them furlough days, which is unpaid work days where they're not allowed to work. It's hurting the students. The students' dorm fees and their tuition fees are going up at every major Illinois public institution. Yet those private institutions, though they do consistently raise rates every year, none of them are going bankrupt. Okay, none of them are firing professors. None of them are cutting back. None of them are destroying their research programs or getting rid of graduate programs. They're all still succeeding because they realize that when the college is that expensive, they have to make sure they're truly catering to the needs of the students. They have to make sure that the students have an incentive to pay that $40,000 a year, so the students are truly getting something out of it. I think this is the reason why, if you have a degree from Harvard or Stanford, you can pretty much write a ticket for yourself in life in anything you do, because people know that that's a school where you've had to work hard and where you've studied hard and where you've gotten one of the best educations possible. Again, I'm certainly not saying that all public institutions are bad. A broken clock gets the time right a couple times a day, and I know that there's definitely some good public institutions out there. But if you look statistically at these institutions, they either A, go bankrupt, or C, massively underachieve compared to the private institutions. As for this concept of if we didn't have public institutions, no one would be going to school, clearly you don't understand the idea of competition. If the government tomorrow, for whatever reason, decided every public school at every level, grade school, junior high, high school, college, was no longer going to be funded and they were either going to be sold off and privatized or simply eliminated, what would happen? Well, a number of entrepreneurs that now have a incentive to enter the market because they're not competing against a government that can just deficit spend or tax people to keep the price of education artificially low, now have an incentive to come in and set up their own schools. And they're going to set up schools that cater to everyone. They're going to set up science-based schools. They're going to set up schools that cater to certain educational disciplines. And they're going to go out and look for the best professors. They're going to go out and try to hire the best people. And the fact that there will be so many schools now flooding the market trying to get a piece of this new market that's opened up, prices are going to go down, because if you now know that you're competing against everyone and they're going to be actually innovating to try to put you out of business, you have to now be on your toes, and you now have to try to carve out a niche for yourself by offering something that they can't. Better professors, better programs, incentives for the students. Competition never makes things worse. Monopoly, government-run monopoly, government-protected cartels always make the situations worse. Okay, when the government protects an industry, saying that it's too important to be left to the private industries, it's always crappy. I don't think it's a coincidence, as I said, that public institutions in this country, A, always run out of money, and B, typically underachieve compared to other countries that, while their schools are still publicly owned, actually have to compete against each other. In other nations, you're not tied to a high school just based on where you live. You're allowed to pick your high school based on where you think you're going to get the best education, which encourages competition in the schools to, again, try. In this country, when you're slotted into a school based on where your house is, the school knows it's going to get a client base, the school knows it's always going to have a customer, and the school has no incentive to provide you with a good education because it doesn't actually have to compete for its students like a private school does. Public education, if it was ever ended, would probably succeed in making, or I know it would succeed in making, education as a whole much, much better.